All right, folks, now that we are recording, good afternoon. It is Thursday, December 7th at 3:03 p.m. I'm going to stop my screen share so I can see all of my wonderful colleagues in this room. I see James, Carmen, Lisa, Christy, so many folks. Maureen, thank you for being here. Happy Thursday. My goodness, the semester's almost coming to a close. I sincerely hope it is closing out nicely for each and every one of you. And I am even more grateful for you being here today so close to the end. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Let me start off with an introduction of myself. I'm Michael. Hi. I teach anthropology. I'm also the online education faculty coordinator, which is just a long, fancy title. That means I get to serve faculty, like all of you, as we navigate the world of online teaching together. So I'm happy to be with you here today. They want to go over just a few housekeeping items before we jump into our esteemed presenter for the day. And really to just take a minute or two. First of all, this meeting is being recorded. Again, many of our colleagues are unable to join us live today, so we want to make this recording available to them. Second thing, if you want to earn an hour of flex credit for being here today, please be sure to sign into the chat with your name and ID. I will keep track of that for the end of the year when it comes time for flex reporting time. Also, do be sure to use the mute and unmute Zoom function mindfully in this Zoom meeting. We do have plenty of time reserved after the presentation for questions. You can also employ the chat function for questions that pop up. I'll be keeping track of those, and so we can have a great conversation about this exciting topic of partially online teaching and learning. And then, of course, one last housekeeping item. We do have the automatic closed captions enabled for this meeting. If you want to turn those on, just click the CC button at the bottom of your Zoom screen if you'd like to have those on. I know I sure do. All right, so let me give you just a very, very brief context of why we're here today. And this is the final one. I can't believe it. This is the third of 3 workshop series on the topic of partially online teaching and learning. And this is coming from a collaboration between online learning and academic affairs. And here's a few things that are happening with partially online teaching. Well, and some of them have already begun. First of all, you might already know this term as hybrid. The college is moving away from that term and moving towards partially online in the hopes that it is a little bit clearer for students to understand what this modality is really all about. Second thing that is happening is that there will be roughly, and this depends on the class, the program, the discipline, there's going to be roughly a 50-50 balance of online time versus in-person time. Again, this can vary. If you're not exactly sure what that looks like for what you teach, check in with your department head and or dean for clarification on that point, because every department has, a little different need in that respect. And then finally, starting in spring of 2024, which is right around the corner, the college is aiming to increase the number of partially online sections by approximately 20% across the campus. So we're trying to offer more partially online courses in different term lengths, 16 weeks, 8 weeks as well. But again, if you have questions about what that looks like for you, be sure to check in with your department head and or dean. Okay, so just a little context for why we're here. But now, let me introduce our presenter of the day. It is my great pleasure to introduce Joanna Haan. Joanna started here as a full-time faculty of chemistry in the physical sciences department back in 2014. Before that, she taught part-time at 7 other colleges. You got that right? Yeah, 7 other colleges, Joanna, and universities across the country, learning from students and colleagues along the way. She recently completed a sabbatical, a year-long sabbatical, at CSU Fullerton, where she researched sustainable sugars for use in small fuel cells and audited a fully online upper division chemistry lab course. I don't exactly know what that means, but it sounds very, very interesting, Joanna. When COVID hit, the COVID pandemic, it pushed Joanna a bit out of her teaching comfort zone into this online and partially online world. But she has demonstrated a passion to design student-ready online courses and partially online courses. And she's thoroughly enjoying the challenges that partially online classes are opening up and the opportunities that it offers to her and her students. In addition to teaching, Joanna is currently co-department head of the Physical Sciences Department and serves as an Academic Senate faculty representative on the Online Education Committee. And she often lends her expertise of teaching STEM online. So please join me in giving a warm welcome to Joanna Haan. Joanna, the floor is yours. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you so much, Michael. And thank you everybody for being here. If your days and weeks are anything like mine right now, I know you had to carve this hour out. So anyways, I'm going to jump right to sharing my screen and get to our slideshow here. All right, can you all see that okay? Get some thumbs up.
Looks good.
In keeping with teaching online, partially online, my webcam like turned pink on me. Zoom was freezing, things that have never happened to me before. And have to say I've learned to just kind of roll with things. And I like partially online teaching because there's a few less things to roll with than online teaching. So every day is not like a tech disaster waiting to happen. So yeah, thanks for the welcome, Michael, and I'll just jump right in because I know we have limited time. So I'm going to talk to you about partially online or hybrid teaching with my Chemistry 3 class as a case study, and I'll tell you a little bit more about it in a moment. So today's topics that I'd like to share with you, I'll share with you the course that I'm teaching just so you kind of understand the place I'm coming from. Kind of how I got to partially online, because I think we each bring our own experiences that make us good at that. And then self-doubt I want to address also. I went to 2 fantastic talks in this series, Christy, and then I'm blanking on the other name, but the 2 talks, and I sat in them and was like, I can't present in here. Like, I'm doubting myself. And so I just want to put that out there as an honest reflection. And then I'll talk to you about some different things about how I've designed my partially online course. So that's kind of where we're headed. So defining, like Michael said, just kind of where the college is at, partially online is roughly going to be 50-50 breakdown of in-person and online. And so I'm in physical sciences. Like he said, I teach chemistry, but we have physics that's partially online also, and some other classes. So typically we've had, hang on a second, lab meetings in person and then lectures as asynchronous online has been the typical model in our area. And I will warn you guys, so Michael, maybe you can help me. I had to shift over to my laptop, so I don't have my dual screens. So normally I'd be seeing all of you and seeing the screen, so I can't really monitor chat or anyone's faces or anything right now like I normally would.
No worries. I got the chat covered for you.
Okay, awesome. So those are kind of definitions of where I'm coming from. In terms of norms, I learned this from all of you, all my colleagues, kind of setting the norms at the front end. But I think with the partially online, anything that is online or partially online where you're not with each other as much as normal, I've learned to be extra respectful, patient, kind, clear, really like since COVID, I think those have been some of the biggest growth areas since I've been online and partially online, to draft my email and then I'm going back and adding pleases and thank yous and deleting things that are hard, just because the tone and the stress level is different when you don't have all that human to human, like in the same room thing. And I'll share these slides out when we're finished, but there's some great etiquette guidelines that I use from the college. And then I always tell my students, and I tell them this in person now too, don't waste time being shy. I tend to be a thinker, introvert, like kind of sitting back, and I tell them, you know what, we have so little time together. Just get those questions out there right away. Don't take too much time to think it over. Again, with partially online, you kind of only have 50% of your usual time. So the shy time has to be outsourced to somewhere else because you don't have time for it in a partially online class. And I think that goes for me as an instructor too. When I'm feeling shy about something, I have to just nudge myself out there because I only have half the time I normally would to get a student's name or get to know them. So that's kind of some background definitions and norms. So Chem 3 is the class that I'll be talking about today. It's pre-nursing students. It's general organic and biological chemistry. So it's a survey course. So it's not in our usual chemistry sequences, which is kind of unusual in the sciences. It's often the only chemistry course they take. So that gives me a little bit of flexibility to not stress about like continuing on in the sequence. I have a lot of non-traditional students. So students who are older, students who have a lot of caregiving responsibilities, students who are typically working 20 to 40 hours a week, even more so than our typical chemistry classes. It's a very non-traditional group. And it tends to be kind of with that non-traditional, pretty bimodal, more so than some of our other classes where to me that bimodal word means we've got excellent students, maybe half the class is earning A's and then a few B's and then a lot of C's and D's and F's. And so it's a tricky group to cater to because you've got ones who are just like eating up everything you give them and then you've got ones who are really struggling. So that's kind of typical what you'll see there. In terms of hours, I see them for, this is a fully in-person schedule, 4 hours a week of lecture and then 3 hours per week for lab. So that's kind of the class that I was working with in terms of lecture and lab. So that's the class. Here's me. And I'm going to zoom right through this because I just want to give you a snapshot of kind of what I brought to the classroom, what experiences I brought. As a college student, I took a literal like paper, mail it back and forth psychology class way back 20 years ago. And then an online learning tech class a few years later, way back at the beginning of like the internet, Facebook, all that stuff. And then early career, I worked a lot with an LMS quiz thing with someone who was right at the cutting edge of that at University of Wisconsin for a couple of years. And so that was interesting. I was a teaching assistant. And so kind of had a finger on how it was feeling to the students and also what the faculty were doing. I team taught a fully online chemistry class for a couple of years, which really opened my eyes to what was possible in terms of online teaching and STEM especially. And then I spent 13 years just teaching in person. Fast forward to the pandemic, and actually right before the pandemic, I did the cultural curriculum audit just a couple of months before that and picked up a few things that have transformed the way that I teach, including my online and partially online. A few key things I took from that were transparent teaching, just making my organization really, really clear. Giving more low stakes assessments, just lots of chances to practice. Less high stakes assessments, and then more active learning time. Eventually I flipped, which was something Christy, I think, talked about, where students watch my lectures in mini videos, and then we spend class time doing problems. So eventually I moved to that. But those were things that came out of the curriculum audit to improve the equitable outcomes of my classes. And they ended up informing my partially online teaching a lot. So then I taught Chem 3 fully online with some synchronous hours. I audited, so I wasn't graded, which was nice, but a 300 level chemistry lab at Cal State Fullerton while I was on my sabbatical there. And that was quite an experience. Like they shipped us glassware. I sat with glassware at my dining room table and set up like a whole experiment that you're getting upper division credit for normally. And my husband was actually teaching it. He was in the garage. I was in the dining room. But it was really isolating, very, very isolating to sit. And I was auditing, so I wasn't in groups with the other students. I wasn't in the breakout rooms. And I just sat there like feeling very lonely. So that was kind of like a really good experience in the pandemic to be a student myself. And then we have 4 kids. So I got to observe, can't even see it here, but grades 5, 6, 8, 10, 11, 12, all were happening like in my dining room, in my living room. Like I heard all those classes going on, and I think I got to observe a lot of other people teaching, and also my 4 kids kind of going through a lot of the same kind of classes and content that we are. So I let that all try to build a little bit of empathy also, and just insights as I teach partially online now too. Post-pandemic, I got really intrigued by these alternate methods of teaching. So I actually ran the same class for a couple semesters in person, partially online, and fully online all at once. And so that's kind of where my course design mindset comes from then. I've tried to develop materials that work in all 3 of those settings, like the same lecture videos for all 3 settings, the same quizzes for all 3 settings. I gave the same final to all 3 settings, just so I could kind of be a little bit scientific about like what's working, what's not, and also efficient. So that's kind of my background. All right. And then I guess before we jump into the nuts and bolts of what I did, I want to call out again, self-doubt, or maybe in another setting, you might call it like imposter syndrome. But I think just more broadly, self-doubt. I'm learning perfect is the enemy of good. I'll try to go for perfect sometimes. Good is good enough, especially when you're starting with something new. I'm learning, like I said, with teaching the same class in multiple modalities to reduce, reuse, recycle, like be as multi-purpose in the things I develop as possible. When I'm doubting myself and I go, man, I can't keep up with you, I've found like rather than comparing myself to the whole universe, just find 1 or 2 people that are encouraging and a champion so that my world stays small and I don't have to doubt myself as much. I'm learning to try a small thing when I'm feeling, I don't know if I can do this. Let me just try a discussion post this week and see how it goes. Like keep it small, helps me. It also helps me when I'm freaking out and doubting myself to just reflect on how much I've learned. I'm sure each of you could tell an hour of stories of how much you've learned over the past 4 years in higher ed. And sometimes I just need to take a step back and say, yeah, I've come a long ways. Like I have so far to go, but like I've come a long ways. I also like to ask my students for positive feedback because the negative feedback is very present in my head. And so asking them for, hey, what's working well, helps when I'm stressing out. And then things will fail. So I try to acknowledge it, learn from it. And then like I just kind of shared with my own story, letting my learning struggles, like sitting alone at the dining room table, doing an online lab, try to let that build empathy inside of me, or watching my kids struggle, or hearing from my students that they're struggling. I feel like the empathy goes a long ways in teaching, but sometimes extra when you're not seeing each other as much. Just having that intention of empathy goes a long ways. So those are just some things I do when I start doubting, jumping off the deep end of something new. So I'm going to start and finish kind of my slides here with some questions to consider as you all are working on your partially online classes. And so my goal with a partially online class, hang on one second, is like any class, really, right? To be organized, concise, simple, and effective. I want them learning stuff, but I want it to be above average. I can kind of get by in my in-person classes with, oh, by the way, here's a change or whatever. But with partially online, like with online, that doesn't fly so well. You have to be more organized. So with that goal in mind, these are some key questions I landed on that drive my course design with my partially online class. What is necessary and why? So like, do we have to have a group discussion? Yes. Okay. Because I want my students to connect with each other. Do I have to do 5 different practice worksheets? No, I could probably whittle it down to 1 really good practice worksheet. So what is necessary and why is something I make myself think through. Also, what is rigid? What is flexible? In science, like they won't take our classes for transfer if there's been an online lab for a lot of our classes. So it's rigid that the lab has to be in person. What's flexible is what I do with the lecture time. It could be all asynchronous. I could do part on campus and part not. So where are my constraints, right? What's rigid, what's flexible? Also, this is a big one for me. What can be done in person or what could be done online? And sometimes what could be done better in person or better online. So again, labs are done better in person. Repeat practice attempts on quizzes, done better online. So trying to kind of think through what belongs where as I'm sifting through my class. And since usually with a partially online class, I think for most of us, it's something we've taught in person or taught online already. We're able to kind of think through what makes sense to move where in the design. This one's a huge one for me. And again, maybe I'm the only person, but I highly doubt it. Maybe I'm the only person that gets self-doubt, and maybe I'm the only person that burns out by the end of the semester, but I'm really learning to lean into like what I enjoy and what the students enjoy to just keep that joy and enthusiasm going. So if we really like talking to the other humans in the class. Like I asked my students last semester, what do you want a little more student to student time of? And they said their top answer was just getting to know each other, not talking about chemistry. It was just, they wanted to just talk to other students. So I'm like, if that's something that is enjoyable to them, let me make sure I keep that into the class design, just purely time to get to know each other. And then likewise, what stresses me out, what stresses students out, seeing if I can minimize those things. I think Nigel's here. He was here last time and asked about or talked about testing. So testing online stresses me out in a chemistry class because I'm hyper aware of cheating and making sure that that happens or doesn't happen or how to make sure it doesn't happen. And so I just do my big assessments in person with partially online. And that's a huge stress release for me because I'm doing the thing that's stressful in the modality that makes the most sense for it to just make things less worrisome. And same with students too. If there's something I notice they really hate doing online, can I move it to in person just so it's, you know, like we don't have to make things hard for ourselves or for them. And then another, not so much question, but just my mindset again is reduce, reuse, recycle. Like how simple can I make this and how portable can I make what I do so it can be used in my fully in-person section or in my fully online section. And I know you want to treat each modality as its own entity, but at the same time, if I'm doing something great in one modality, I'd like it to be transferable to the others. So I try to kind of have that mindset. So yeah, so those are the questions or kind of the guiding principles that I throw out to you as, you know, take your class that you're teaching partially online and kind of sift through some of those questions. So just to give me a slight glimpse of the humans out there, maybe, I have a question for you all. Pick a modality so you can tell us this is online or in person. What is something you or your students enjoy about the class? So if I can ask you all to just drop in chat, tell us online or in person and something that you or your students enjoy. And then we can kind of see who's in the room here, and I'll drop something in too. Again, I'm on my laptop, so I feel like I'm on this micro screen. So let's see what you guys are saying. Getting to know each other, lab time and personal contact, interactive anything. I said online, I like reading students' discussions, stories, hobbies. I'm kind of like, I like writing, I like reading. I'm kind of a quiet person. I've enjoyed that about online. Transformations, human contact, Kahoots. My students love those. Personal style and discussions, yes. Breakout rooms, factual discussion of current events. So many different things, but for me those are important because I'm like, that's where the students are having fun, they're going to learn something. That's where I'm having fun, I'm going to be a dynamic, happy instructor, and that's like a win. So I think it's important to lead with that, like what's fun and how can I make sure I do the funnest online things and the funnest part or funnest in-person things in this like hybrid kind of format. So that was just to kind of get us thinking and see what each other enjoy. A lot of human to human contact there, though, it sounded like, right? And creativity and connecting to everyday stuff. So some commonalities there. I'm going to skip this next slide, which is stressful. Okay. But likewise, like I said, testing was very stressful for me in my fully online class. They had to draw pictures and things that were easy to find on the internet. So I tried to move that to the in-person side of my design. So now to some practical things. So I have some practical first 2-week tips, and then I've got just some screenshots from my class to show you. That's kind of where we're headed next. So the first 2 weeks, in my opinion, my experience, are so important. And I have still got to work on making my first couple of weeks excellent. I want to really set the tone in those first couple of weeks. I'm a parent to 4 teenagers. So like, if you can just get them doing the right thing, like right off the bat, then life is easy after that, right? Not unlike teaching, where if you can just set that tone initially, things will go better. So I try to set the tone that being together is fun and meaningful, both in person and online. In those both settings, I try to kind of emphasize that. Also, I try to really set and manage expectations. My class is 5 units. It's a heavy workload. And at least for the lecture lab combo, I think students come in thinking it's going to be a little bit easier than the full 5 units on campus. They don't realize it's going to be a lot of work still. So I try to hit them with some of that reality before the drop deadline. Not only am I setting, like, here's the parameters of what we're doing, but I'm trying to help them be realistic about the workload that they can carry. So the workload, I am a stickler on attendance in every chance I can get, rewarding engagement online, rewarding engagement in the class. So not even necessarily taking attendance, but just having activities that I collect and are graded right off the bat. I have a very set rhythm to my due dates. It's not all Sunday night because that doesn't work for such a big credit class in my experience. So I've learned to give them that rhythm, but the first week is rhythm without chemistry. And then the second week is rhythm and chemistry. If I try to kind of teach them the due dates and learn chemistry at the same time, it's too much for them. So I try to give them non-content stuff the first week in terms of due dates. Setting the expectation for what they're going to master, the level that they're going to master at, communication. So I use comments a lot, like submission comments, announcements, trying to get all those things out to them initially. How to field questions. I keep telling them, how to get in touch with me. And then this is another big one that I think I've added and learned with both online, but partially online too. The tech skills, I want to get them practicing all those things in the first 2 weeks, right? So that the skills are in place and now we can dive into the content. If I try to do both of those at once, it's just can tend to be overwhelming, at least in chemistry. So using notifications, if I use online homework through Canvas, so I've got all the practice quizzes and things, different types of questions, dragging and dropping and matching, like I've got those tech skills built in. Uploading a PDF, images, discussion boards, whatever. For example, with the PDFs, one thing I do is I have them fill out a schedule, and then that gets saved and uploaded as their first, like, upload a PDF assignment. So that's kind of how I keep the chemistry out of it, but get them to do some skills at the same time. So those are some main things that I try to do in the first couple of weeks. And whatever is important in your class, I would encourage you to make just like an extra organized effort in those first couple of weeks to fine tune it, really like put your best organization effort into those first couple of weeks. So yeah, I'm not used to just talking. I want to keep asking like questions. So hopefully, feel free to flag me and interrupt if you want. Something else I'm learning then is to have technology work with me and for me. Again, like the gift of partially online is you're not bound to online technology quite so tightly. So you can choose the best of it. You can kind of have the best of that world. Video lectures is something I never did until COVID hit, till the pandemic hit. And so I now have my whole class broken into 5 to 10 minute video lectures that I use in my in-person class. Also, they watch those at home and they come in and we do problems together. Those transformed my class. Students came to me. I thought, oh, okay, it's a way to cope, right, during the pandemic. But my DSPS students came to me and said, I don't need all these accommodations anymore, because I can just sit and watch your video over and over. I can slow it down. I can pause it. I had students for whom English was a second language, and they said, this is great. I can pull it, and watch the transcript as it goes. I missed class. I can watch this. So it was helping students who had other challenges. And so that was where technology really helped me provide better access, and hopefully some better equity to my students. It was helping me, right? Let the tech help. I use the weekly announcements, or I use the announcements in Canvas to send out a weekly announcement. That also started online, but I've continued it with partially online and in person. So every week I send an announcement, just some reminders. I'll show you an example of one in a bit. Just in time tips. Hey, there's a workshop at our Science Learning Center. Whatever. I try to keep those concise, and I always give them a, hey, here's what's coming up this week. I see my colleagues do beautiful announcements with all kinds of links in them. And I'm kind of mixed on that for my class in particular. I actually try not to link everything. So I don't link them to, hey, check this module out, or hey, check this module out, and the link is there, because I want them to learn to navigate the class. So I'll tell them, go to modules, and the bottom module has some review material, or go to modules and you can go to the top one for the flyers and stuff like that. So that's just kind of an intentional thing. Again, maybe the parent of teenagers thinking, I'm like, I don't want to link it for you. I want you to know where to go to find help for yourself. So those weekly announcements turned out to be wildly popular. Students say they're one of their favorite, most useful things in the class. I created during the pandemic, and then a bit after, my own little bank, my own big bank of questions that are weekly homework quizzes that students do. And that has been a huge help, where technology now gives my students 10 attempts at doing some chemistry practice problems. And I draw from pools, and I'm happy to work with anyone on Canvas. New quizzes is actually what I've worked with. But that enabled me to give them 10 attempts at a homework assignment. And I also make little quizzes that are like 1 or 2 attempts after that. Again, the technology is like giving them all those equitable chances that I couldn't give them like in person before, but partially online lets me do that. Also discovered submission comments. I don't know if others in the room use these. This was new to me, but in the gradebook, students can leave little comments, and I can tell Canvas to send me a daily digest of those. And those save me so much time. Again, maybe I'm late to this party, but I get my daily digest and I can click on whoever's comment about a lab report where they said, hey, why did you grade it this way? And it takes me right to that lab report. So I don't have to navigate to the gradebook, to the student, to the assignment. The daily digest just links me from that comment. It links me right to that assignment. Huge time saver for me when I've got, 150 students that I'm trying to keep up with. And then I've also used the discussion boards, first online, but I actually brought them into my partially online class this semester because I like reading. That was a spark joy thing. Like, I love reading their stories a little bit for whatever reason. I just have always loved people's stories. So I did that. And also they had said, we wish we had more time to talk to each other. So for my partially online students, I said, well, let's bring the discussion board in, and I enjoy reading them and they have enjoyed chatting with each other. And it's not actually usually a chemistry thing. It's like, how are you doing this week? And maybe, do you have any questions for class? But then I'll always put just a fun thing. What music are you listening to this week? What do you like to do for holidays? What do you do for 5 minutes if you're stressed out? Like, just a lighthearted, like that before and after class kind of chatter that is hard to capture when partially online is like every minute counts and we're together. I always feel short on time. So those discussion boards that are just kind of a friendly space, I think have worked really well in my class. So that's technology helping us connect. And then I've always done this for all my years of teaching, but I love using surveys. if I'm feeling out of touch with the class, I'll send them a short survey. How's this going? How's that going? And I always survey them to start the class, to end the class, and at least once in the middle of the semester, just to get a pulse on how things are going. Get that feedback. I don't want to wait or only rely on like a college feedback thing. I want their feedback. So, and again, that can be my self-doubt, right? Or my good critical mind is like, give me some data. How are things actually going? And I want to hear from the quiet students, the missing students. So a survey that's worth some points, just a couple points, can be a way to make sure I'm hearing from all of my students without sacrificing my in-person time with them. So that's some tech stuff. I'm not watching chat here, but are we doing okay? Are there any questions at this point? I guess I'll skim through it later. Michael, is there anything?
No, we're doing okay. We're kind of we're going off on a few tangents in chat. Nothing directly related to your comments right now. So you're good.
Okay. All right. So yeah, so like explore, I have like learned so much. Like I never used announcements. I never used the low stakes homework assignments. I never used submission comments or discussion boards. I never did any of those till I was teaching online and partially online. And I didn't do them all at once. I just kind of did one small thing at a time. And it's, I think, enhanced my class. So next, here's a quick glimpse of the daily digest of submission comments. I realize it's just like small font and things, but you can see this is what comes into my email every single night. And so it's taking me in like 8 different directions of assignments, but I'm able to just click on that, and it takes me right to whatever assignment they have a question or concern on. So it's really efficient for managing a class that has a lot of assignments in it. So tells you who sent this, what topic, and I can click to it. My animations are off here, sorry. Just to give you a glimpse of shifting from in-person to partially online, kind of the structure shift that I underwent. Normally, I would have my in-person content. We do lectures, we do assessments, we do a lab, we bond with each other. And then it would take them another 6 or 10 hours at home to do their practice and, you know, different things. With the partially online style, so one of the ways I've taught is Friday lab, and that's, I just see them once a week. And so I have my class set up that I see them now on Fridays, but they have due dates on Mondays and Wednesdays. Okay, so kind of mimicking the fact that I see them twice a week in person lets me use the same material, use the same schedule. But I had to shift a lot of things to the online side of things. So I kept assessments and lab and a little bonding, but now the lecture content had to be shifted to the online piece. Their practice was shifted online more. Some of the bonding with classmates, that was the discussion boards, helped me out. And I made pre-lab videos to shift some of that out of our in-person time. And then they also got a little more time to write their lab reports at home. So I had to pull everything I could have out of the in-person time and shift it over to the online time. So that was kind of practically where I saw things shifting. The interesting thing was, once I did that for my partially online class, it ended up changing my in-person class. And so this is where I've tried to let every class make the other ones better. And so you can see now I actually made all these videos for my partially online students. And so now I can use those videos to let them watch some lecture content at home for my in-person class. And now we have like 3 times as much time to practice in class. We can do all the hard problems. We can do all the hard stuff together. Also, we shifted some of the pre-lab work to before class. So now we have more time to do the lab, do the writing, all of that when we're in person. So my partially online class borrowed from the in-person, and now my in-person borrows from the partially online. And that's very like synergistic, makes things easy for me. So some screenshots then. And I'm super happy to ever like talk with any of you, see better ideas from you, share my Course shells with you if you want to see stuff, but this is my welcoming and useful homepage, or hopefully, hopefully useful and welcoming. Some key places that I send them to. I just use little icons from PowerPoint to like build these pictures here. That's a starting point. Here's my communication plan that is posted in the communication link there. I put first classmates as communication because there's only one of me and there's 30 to 70 of them. So I try to really nurture that they are each other's first line of help and I'm a secondary line of help. So ways to connect with classmates, ways to connect with me. I've got that there. This is an example of the weekly announcements that I send out. So it depends how much time and energy I have. Sometimes these are shorter than others, but I always will give them something at the top, anything I need to just kind of update them. These are things I would normally say in my in-person class as, you know, daily announcements, but it's all in a weekly message instead. And then I always give them the same week at a glance, same format. I just change the numbers every week. You know, now we're on chapter 3, now we're on chapter 4. So same format every week, giving them that little week at a glance. And this is, again, something I started partially online and online, but I do it for my in-person classes now. And it's one of the like top 3 things students say helps them in the class is just getting those really organized weekly announcements. So everyone will appreciate it, not just your partially online students, if you choose to do something like that. So that's one thing. Here's a sample content module then, or no, sorry, not a content module. This is the first module. So I've got the syllabus, I've got a group discussion, just, you know, hi, my name is, some friendly stuff. And this is where I'm giving them, like I said earlier, the rhythm of the class. So they always have an intro quiz and then a post quiz and then maybe some kind of upload. So I'm giving them those things, but with no chemistry attached yet. So it's an intro quiz that asks about the syllabus. And then they have like a follow-up with less attempts about the syllabus. And then they upload their schedule. And so I do that all like minus the chemistry for my first module. But then you'll see it looks very similar. Oh, and a discussion. Looks very similar when we go to a content module, a little different, but I've got notes, I've got practice. That's where they get 10 attempts to practice from the question bank. They've got a post quiz, a weekly discussion, a weekly quiz, and then the terms. So I don't have, my computer's all off here, but the quiz and the lab, those would be things that would be happening in person, and everything else is happening asynchronously online. So that kind of pieces together there. Yeah, Michael.
Hey, Joanna, Lisa asked a question in the chat. What is the schedule upload? I was curious about that too. You showed it on the previous slide. What is that?
Students also appreciate that so much. So I borrowed it from one of the learning videos, learning skills, I forget what the word is for them, from the MDSC. They had a series of like study skills videos, and one of them is like make a schedule. Scott Volker, I think, did a video where he talked through like, think about how much time you really need to spend, you know, running errands and doing all these things. So I just give them a blank PDF Excel file that they can fill in their week at a glance schedule every hour. And I ask them to fill it in with their classes and their study time and their other extras. And I link it to Scott's video, the study skills video that's about 30-40 minutes long. But I tell them, and I actually show it and model it. I do a sample one in my welcome video where I say, okay, here's your 14 hours of pieces. Where are those going to fit in your spreadsheet here? So think about like that you're going to need 20 hours a week on this class or whatever. And so I have them make their own version of that and upload it. So
thank you for that, Joanna. Yes, time management from the get-go.
Yeah. And so then I'll remind them, you know, life shifts, my life shifts. I'll remind them halfway through the semester or maybe a month in, usually more like a month in. I feel like is a good moment. I'll say, hey, go back to that schedule. Now that you've kind of got a handle on your classes and your work and your studying, maybe revise that schedule and make it work for how your life is turning out to be. But I get definitely a good handful of comments every semester where students say at the end of the semester, I'm so glad you made us do that schedule. It seemed kind of annoying, but I'm so glad you made us do that. And the detail is what's important to make it useful, like not just class hours, but like, when am I going to study? When am I going to like hang out with my family? When am I going to work? So yeah, thank you. So yeah, the content modules, same exact format every single time. My students give me a lot of positive feedback about the fact that this class is very consistent, which seems intuitive to me, but they say sometimes they don't always run into that in their other classes. So I think having that seamless repetition is huge for them. Let's see. I don't think this slide matters, so we're gonna keep going. One thing, again, just to the joy and the fun of teaching in a new way with partially online, whatever, is I found some new online resources. Like, I've never had to really lean on online chemistry models before, but I had to dig into that with my online class. So now they're there in my partially online class, and now they're there in my in-person class, all in the Canvas shells, because if you don't have a model kit at home, like, here's some great places you can see how, you know, the world is put together at an atom level. So that's kind of just a fun bonus, right? You never know what fun bonuses you're going to run into, new resources, because you're trying something new, trying to move things online. So here's some common student feedback. I always really value like what they're saying. So with my partially online class, this is what they said to me. So maybe your students might be similar. They love the short videos. So I took a 2-hour interactive class and whittled it down to 30 minutes. That took some thinking on my part, like, how can I say the most in the least words and the least best pictures? And I broke that 30 minutes into 5 or 10-minute videos. So they've got maybe between 4 and 6 videos for what used to be 2 hours of back and forth class conversation. And they rave about that. I hear very often from them, my professor's videos are so long. I love that yours are short because I can take a break, because I don't tune out, because I can come back to it. So I don't know, take that for what it's worth. They rave about 5 to 10-minute videos, but they're compact, right? And so I know that they can slow them down on YouTube, or I know that they can listen to them again. So I packed a lot into that 30 minutes. It's a very thoughtful 30 minutes. They also tell me a lot that the structure and organization helps them stay organized and keep up with the content. They again rave about the structure and organization, and I'm like, I don't know, it just seems common sense to me, but as much as you can be super consistent in what you do every week, they seem to really appreciate that. For my class, I have Monday due dates, I have Wednesday due dates, and then on Friday we have lab and a summative assessment. They often ask me, especially at first, why isn't everything due on Sundays? Because that's like a common way that partially online and online classes are. And I tell them, well, if you waited till Sunday, like, you've got literally 15 hours of work to do all in one day, and you can't do that. So for my heavy unit class, by the end of the semester, they're like, I'm so glad we have all these different due dates. That was different, but I'm so glad we have them. They tell me that they like multiple attempts on their low stake assignments. So I said I have my online homework. That became like a big piece of the practice that they do. I used to give them 4 attempts, and they said, we want more. So then I give them 6 attempts on each assignment, and they were like, we want more. So I give them 8, and then I'm at 10 now. So they get 10 attempts, and I tell them, hey, save some of those for the final. So I say, do some now, and then do some attempts come closer to the final. I do limit the attempts, and I'm straight up honest with them on this. I tell them, I want you to treasure those attempts. So you don't just click through trying to find the answers. I want you to do an attempt and feel like, okay, I need to go talk to a classmate or Professor Haan or a tutor to like figure out what the answer is, because these attempts just don't last forever. So I've chosen to limit their attempts on some of that practice. And if they complain to me, I'm like straight up honest. I want you to treasure those attempts. I want you to, and I also don't put answers on those. I give them lots of answer keys for other things, but I don't actually show the answers on those homeworks because they're coming from a pool of problems. So again, I want them to have this as a nudge to like, go talk to a human, go have some of that human contact for some help. Coming out of the cultural curriculum audit, I was inspired to have less high stakes formative assessments. That was also a good practice for minimizing like worrying about cheating and stuff like that. And so I shifted to weekly quizzes instead of the traditional 4 exams. I have small quizzes and big quizzes. So we have some that are like a little bigger. Students love that, like unanimous, they like that. And I'm still giving them the same content. It's just broken up a little bit smaller. I still give a final, which is still kind of breaks all the rules of large summative assessments, but that was a way that I could hold myself accountable and compare the different modalities too. So I give small quizzes and big quizzes. Every time I see them, they're getting a quiz. And then we have a final exam that's cumulative. And then here's that comment I hear fairly often. I'm so glad you made us fill out a schedule the first week. In retrospect, they appreciate being nudged to the time management. And then this is another one that I really have to hold my ground on. They'll also ask me, why can't we go over lecture material during lab? But I really want to honor the integrity. And this is just kind of my pet peeve, but I want to honor the integrity of that lab time. It should be hands-on because that gives hands-on students a chance to do that. That's like what we're supposed to be doing in that hands-on time. So I hold office hours before that lab time and after, and I tell them, we can talk lecture questions before and after, but we are here to take a quiz and get our hands dirty. Like that is the point of this lab time. And I really try to hold that line hard, that this is time for hands-on stuff. I am next year gonna take one of my 4 lecture hours and make it in person. I haven't done that so far for a lot of reasons, but I'm gonna do 1 hour mandatory in-person lecture and then the 3 hours of lab, to try to kind of meet them in the middle on that. But when I've surveyed them, again, my class is bimodal. Half of them want that hour of lecture and half of them just want to come in for lab. So I've kind of hesitated to force them to be there for more time. I know I'm almost out of time here. I'm almost done with my slides. Another really common issue I run into with partially online, the students get to those weekly quizzes, the ones in person, and they say, this is too hard. This is not enough time. And that's where it's really helped me that I'm using the same quizzes in my in-person class. So I want to give them the same content experience. And so what my partially online students tend to do is underestimate the time and the level of mastery needed for the class. And so I take that comment as an opportunity to say, well, you need to practice more, okay? I don't go to a soccer game or a play or any kind of performance without doing rehearsal upon rehearsal upon rehearsal. And so my partially online students tend to think I'm pushing them too hard and asking too much when in fact they need to spend 10 hours a week practicing and they've only spent 5, not realizing that like they need to spend another 5. And we're talking in chemistry, high unit class, but they need to spend more time doing homework repetitions, more math problems, more reactions. And so I try to have that conversation as early in the semester as possible. That the way you get faster is you rehearse more. The way you get faster is you practice more. So yeah. Random tips. I'll leave these, but they love the organization. Reading the room and adapting is important. Bringing joy. I'm at the point I've got my classes I've been using for 4 or 5 years now, and I think I need to revisit them with my soul-searching questions of what's necessary and what's not, because every class gets bloated and boring eventually. So I need to revisit and make sure I'm back to the essential stuff. And you've kind of heard me talking all day about designing with all the modalities in mind. So that to me has been a big time saver and a help to my students too. So yeah, here's those same questions we started with, you know, what's necessary, where does this belong? How can I reuse material I've already got? So I just kind of throw those out there as maybe the most important thing to me is those design questions. And then you've got this. I just talked for so much longer than I normally talk, but I guess we have like 3 minutes and I have time to hang out if anyone has questions. But I hope that gave you like a little glimpse into my class. I hope, I don't know.
It most certainly did. Joanna. Thank you very much. Let's give a round of applause. There was so much there, Joanna, and one thing that really struck me throughout was um, your honesty throughout the presentation about things like overcoming self-doubt and zooming with your whole family in different grade levels, from your home. So I think we forget that piece sometime, that we are humans behind these computers. So thank you for sharing that. Let's take a little time for questions. I'm going to stop the recording. Again, if you need to go, that is okay. But Joanna and I were good to hang out for a little bit if you have questions. So thank you. I am going to stop the recording, though, right near at 3:58 p.m.